Last video, we replaced the lower fender section on the other side. This video, let's see if we can do an even better job at installing this classic fab repair panel. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the garage. And last video, if you watched that one, we did the lower section of the front fender on the passenger side. This week, we're going to do the lower section on this side. I think I learned a lot from the other side that we can make this side go even better. I definitely struggled at some points with the other side and getting everything to fit, but always learning. So this side here is quite a bit more rusted. The other side, it only really looked rusted down here. We ended up cutting off basically right here, this lower triangle. Where this one's more rusted, we might need to take off more, and I think a lot of my struggles in the last video was because I just tried to cut it off right here. And I think it might be easier to just zip it all the way across. So potentially that's what we're going to try this week. But let's get the fender off there and do a quick inspection on the back side and see what it looks like. Now this fender is quite a bit more rusty on the back than the other one. We got surface rust all the way up there, all the way over here. This is even damaged. We're going to have to do some repairs there. And the reason for that is this is, I believe, the original fender on the car. It has the matching undercoating that the rest of the car has. It's all crumbly. You can tell it's quite old. That stuff cleans up very easy though. It's very barely surface rusted. Down here, obviously, that is not the case. The other side, the passenger side that we did in the last video, was definitely not the original fender. It had Nissan part numbers on it all over the place, and it did not have any undercoating. It was just black paint. That tells me that that fender was replaced. And I had found a while ago damage down here where it had folded in. I think there was a light accident right here, and they replaced that fender. Not a big deal. I got that one fitting good. So I'm gonna go real quick and clean this one up down in this section so we can see if there's any rust that needs to be taken off that's hidden behind this undercoating. Maybe up here a little bit. And that will help us decide just how much we need to cut off. It's about what it looked like and what I expected to see. So everything that was underneath the undercoating can clean up very nice. You can see basically right here, no undercoating, and it rusted. There was undercoating here, it cleans right up. This over here we can still clean up though, I believe. Down here, obviously we cannot. Now I could just do what we did on the other side and basically cut this triangle out. Where that did not work good last time, I do not want to try it again. I think we'll be best off basically just cutting it right at this body line right here. So that's where we're gonna go with that. I've made that decision. Now, when we did this back here, I replaced this whole lower right here, and it went very, very well. But to get it to fit as well as I did, I took a ton of measurements. I measured a bunch from here out to make sure this spacing didn't go out or in too far. I measured from here down to make sure this didn't sit down too far or too far up here. Obviously, we got our body lines to line everything up with back here and everything. So we need to replicate that. I'm gonna put the fender back on before we cut anything, and we're gonna take a ton of measurements, take a bunch of pictures and everything. That way I know I can get this lower fender panel back exactly where it needs to be. All right, I got it back on there. Snapped it back in place. Got all my body lines lined back up. And all we need for measurements is, I need to know where this point, right where that body line is, how far that is out away from the body of the car. So we get this in and out the right distance. And the same with down here. So I've measured from one point in the car up to here, another point in the car down to here. That way we can reproduce and get that exactly where it was. Everything else though, as far as up and down this way, we can use the body line of the car because we got a nice straight line right across here. And we'll go right across here. We still have that structure in the back here, the inner rocker, or the outer rocker actually, that this is bolted to, and that's not going to move. We've got our door and everything here to line this edge up, so I think that should be actually all we need to do. Let's pop that off and cut it. One thing different I think I want to do with this one before we get cutting the actual lower part of the fender off is to replace this structure in the back. I struggled with that a lot on the other side. The other side, I did this, well, I cut it all apart. I cut this part off so I could see how much I needed to cut off here. And I got this piece all welded back where it needs to go, and then I built this piece in the back. You know, I didn't build it, but I cut it down, and it obviously needs some tweaking. These panels are not perfect, but they are much better than having to fabricate this yourself. Anyways, I think what I want to do is cut this back panel off of the old fender and get this panel in where it needs to go, at least tacked in place to here. I think it'll be easier than trying to do it after when it's behind the fender, because you have to fit it in place while the fender's on the car, or you'll just not even be close. So I think that's where I'm gonna start. I'm gonna pop this off, just this lower section here ish, and get this piece fitting right like that, and we'll go from there. Would you look at that? We got another place where they just filled a rust hole with Bondo and painted over it. So this is one example of some tweaking you need to do to this thing. I've got this piece in here, fitting up nice over here, you know, pretty decent anyway. Just had to do a little bit of tweaking to it, but no matter what I do, unless I completely redo this up here, this down here does not line up. And that's important because this is where your fender actually mounts to the car. If this is too high like that, your fender's gonna be pushed way down. So I need to get this down here, but that messes up my gap up here, which we could fill, but we've also got this bend here that needs to be good to fit in there, and everything where it fits along the car also. So I'm thinking if I leave this up here where it wants to be, trim off right here, because bending it down isn't doing me any good because it's just going to put it at the wrong angle. But if I trim it off, we can move it down, space it a little bit, and then fill in the gap after. I think that's what I'm going to do anyway. I don't know a better option. Let me catch you up to where we are. I've got it fitting pretty decent. That panel is in the back. You can kind of see it right there through the hole. It's not quite perfect though. I've got this side over here fitting pretty good. So I've got it just tacked on there with a Cleco. But if you look in here, it's decent, but there's still, you can't really get in that good with the camera, but there's still a decent gap there, and I've got it shaped the right shape. Like I formed it right to the body of the car and then tried to fit it on, and we're just tweaking it from there. But the reason that I've got a gap out there is because it's hitting on the bottom right around here, and I can't figure out, or I can't get that bend just right out enough that it lets that rest of that sit down where it's supposed to and not have it hit on the fender and hold the fender out. So I think what I'm gonna do as a temporary solution is just make myself a little hole right here in the fender without disturbing the structure of it, so we can still use that to shape everything. And I hope that that will allow me to see what's going on and shape that inner piece. So let's go do that. So with that hole cut in there, I was definitely able to tweak that and get everything fitting very well. It definitely needed to be bent out here and in here. I also needed to clearance it a little bit because it was hitting down bottom on the bottom part of that inner bracket that we cut off that bolts to the car. Just because everything needs a little bit of tweaking, it was touching it itself, or the two pieces. So now that that is clearanced, everything is fitting very well. You can see in here, everything's looking very nice, fitting very nice and tight up against the car. We got a small gap up top, but that is easy to fill, no problem. So I'm very happy with how this is fitting, and I'm gonna tack it in place now. Just these pieces down here, and probably I'll have to pop it back off to grind some paint off, but I'll probably try and bridge that gap up there to hold everything in place up top. That way that can't move when we pop it off. That's probably the best idea. So yeah, let me go, let's grind that paint off, tack it in place, and we'll be ready to work on this. And I will say, this has gone so much better than the other side. doing this piece first and getting it to fit way less frustrating than the other side was. But yeah, let's get that tacked in place. I almost forgot. I had to clean this up before we go and tack this in place because we're not going to be taking that back apart. Don't want any rust in there. So I cleaned it up as good as I could and put some rust encapsulator on there just in case I didn't get everything clean, and put some weld-through primer on this piece. This fits much better than the other side did, like I mentioned. So this is definitely, in my opinion, the better way to do it. Get your back piece built first and fitting right and everything, tack it in, and then use that to help keep it in shape while you do this. But yeah, next step is to cut the bottom part of the fender off. Alright, getting everything fit up here with this piece, and I folded the edge over like we need to do because it's like this side and just bent 90 degrees. So I folded it over, and just like the other side, we can't put this piece underneath that folded lip because it would be way too thick. This new metal is way thicker than the sheet metal here. It would push this part out past the rest of the car too far. So I'm going to do what I did on the other side, but not quite as much. We're going to trim off the very edge of this piece. The only other thing that I'm looking at and not really liking is if I put this on here and line this edge up, we're short over here by like 1/8 of an inch. You can see I pretty much kind of got it lined up right there. If you look over here, so we get a 1/8 inch-ish difference there. So I don't know if maybe I need to just cut this in half so I can extend it each way and weld down the middle. It is a lot of extra welding, but it's not like we don't do that all the time anyway, so I don't know. I'll think about that. I think we're gonna get this side set up perfect, get it all shaped right, cut, fitting right, and then I'll decide on what I want to do on the other side. Here's where I'm at with it. I've got it all fitting pretty nice down here, along here. I had to tweak this bend just a little bit because it was too sharp. But as you can see, this side here does not quite line up. If I keep everything tight along here like it's supposed to be, it pushes the panel this way, like it's not quite. This edge and this edge aren't square how they should be, I would say, because you can see it's nice tight down here. Up top it moves away. I think what I can do there though is tack welds to the side of this to build it up and just grind it smooth. That way, I've seen other people do that with fixing panel gaps and stuff on old cars. I think I can do that. I still have this gap over here where this does not quite go out to the total distance out as the original lower fender. Again, I'm thinking about maybe splitting it in half, pushing it out that, I don't even know, it's 1/8 of an inch, maybe 1/8 of an inch, and just welding it back down. That won't be too hard. I got this tacked in place so that my fender can't move now. It's locked right in place where it needs to be until we get this tacked in. But you can also see I cut this fender right on the same body line as I cut this panel, and this one lines up decent. Need to take a little bit off. This side down here though, we're a good 1/4 of an inch overlapped, and I've measured everything, you know, my distances from in here, so this is where this needs to be right now. I think what we're gonna have to do is trim quite a bit off of this top here to get this fitting just how it needs to fit, you know, in this way, and then decide if we're gonna split this in half. So that's where I'm at anyway. I think that's the next step though, is to trim this off up here. I've got this fitting really well. So we had to do a little bit of tweaking. I noticed that this body line across here, when I had it tightened up against the car here, was actually too high. If you look down the body this way, this was up here somewhere. So I had to bump this down away from where it actually bolts to the car. So we're gonna have to tweak this here. Thinking maybe cut a square out, recess this little square that I cut out, and then tack it back. So the bolt will be a little bit recessed, which is not a big deal. But that gets it lined up perfect. That does throw off this body line here. But like I said before, if I just tack, and then grind it smooth, we should be fine. That's easier to fix than having body lines all messed up. I got this ground down, so we got a nice gap there to weld to. And having this moved this way actually made this line up perfectly. So now we don't have to split this in half and extend it. So I would say the big things with this is, if you're doing one of these, don't go off of this body line. It's not going to be correct. And try to just make sure you line up this body line and this body line and your front edge probably. Those will be the ones that are most important, and then you can fix everything else later. But it's time, let's get welding that in place. Got this all tacked in place, ready to go. You can see I tacked it up along the body line here. I cut this down here and recessed it in there so that is where it needs to go. That way when we fully weld this and take it off, it is gonna stay right in place. The bracket that's on the back here that we did first, I drilled a couple holes through here and just tacked it through there. That way that's locked in place so that it doesn't move when we take it apart. So yeah, we're ready to go. Let's weld right across here. There we go, got it all welded in. It's looking pretty nice. Hopefully everything stayed in place as we welded it. Took my time and made sure we were doing a lot of cooling, a lot of resting. That way, hopefully minimize the warpage. Let's pop it off and see if it stays in place. That's a good sign. That didn't move at all when I just took those vice grips off. It's looking good so far. So looking at the backside here, it looks pretty good. We got decent penetration all along the weld here, so there won't be too much cleanup there. I obviously still gonna weld this here. Gonna do some welding along here just to make sure this is nice and strong. And you can see better how I recessed that piece where it mounts to the bottom of the car right there to keep it at the right spacing. So you see me weld and grind sheet metal plenty. I'm gonna go finish this stuff up right here, and I will catch back up with you when we're ready to put it back on the car. Here we go, get it all cleaned up, looking pretty decent. This weld here that we welded all the way across on the front side. I had to touch up a little bit on the back side, but I didn't do much. And my plan is, on areas like this, this is the back side, obviously nobody's gonna see it. Now I could weld all the way along here and grind it all down, and you wouldn't even be able to tell that that had been welded. However, since it's the back side, I don't think it's necessary. So I'm thinking that maybe just areas like this, just seam seal it. Probably be the best thing. There's plenty of other places on the car that are like that. Everything else on the inside that we didn't get to. Let me know what you guys think about that though, whether that would work or not. I think that's the best course of action. Like I mentioned, everywhere else that we've welded on the car, I haven't welded on the backside because you can't get to it. So I'm thinking, you know, where I can get in with my hands with the seam sealer, I could seam seal it like in the inside of the rear quarters and stuff. I think that would be a good idea and a proper use of seam sealer, even though it's not a lap joint. But I think it would be a good idea. Gotta make sure this still fits good, but I'm happy with where it's looking right now. I gotta trim this off right here just because I don't need it out that far, but I wanna make sure I don't trim too much off where it then doesn't seal against the car. And then we're just gonna grind the front side down and smooth that out and any touch-ups there, and we'll be done. Still fits on here nicely. I've checked all my measurements, everything's fitting good. So one thing we gotta do, besides cleaning this up and cleaning up down here, we still need to weld on this edge right here so we can fix our panel gap. So I think what I'll do is I can probably just pop it out like this. Yeah, I think we'll just pop it out like this. That way I can weld some on there and just pop it back down to try it. Probably the best plan. And it is starting a thunderstorm. Man, it is pouring out. Here's what it looks like after a whole bunch of passes up and down. I put, I don't know, there's maybe 4 or 5 weld thickness up there, you know, spot welds out, tapering down here. Hoping we are close and don't have to do a ton more, but I'm definitely out past up there. But yeah, I gotta get this ground down. Let's see what it looks like. Look at how well that turned out. I just stuck a flexible ruler right across here, eyeballed it up at the top and down at the bottom, made a nice line. It ground off super easy, so we're good with that. I'll double check, make sure that once we stick it back in place, it's still good. And obviously I gotta get the back side, you know, grind off the back of the welds here. I'm not leaving that. Other than that, clean that up, clean this stuff up, and we're done. Get everything all cleaned up over here. I got the fender obviously on the bench upside down, but you can see how nice everything looks. Got everything all smoothed out up there. My body line's good. But before we finish up, I got one more thing I want to do for today. This piece right here at the front of the fender, I believe this is where the bumper would mount to. You can see it's damaged and rusty. I quickly made this up. We're going to just quickly cut this out and weld this one in. Should be a pretty simple process. And there we go. One of the easier projects we've done so far. Let's go and make sure this thing still fits on the car. Well, check that out. Look at that body line. All the way down along, even where we had to add weld onto the side of it. Fits perfect. I checked my dimensions, my measurements. Everything fits perfect, and I am incredibly happy with how this side turned out. This side was so much better than the passenger side, the result, and much less frustrating. I wish I would have done both sides the same as this one, but part of learning, right? I didn't know. I've done this a couple times now, and it is definitely easier to just basically replace the whole bottom section. If you remember right, on the passenger side of the rear rocker, I did a patch like right here and a patch right here, and then on this side I replaced from here all the way down. And again, this side turned out way better than the other side. I did the same thing on this fender, tried to replace as little as possible, thinking that we'd get a better result, easier to keep everything lined up where it should be, and that was wrong. It's definitely easier, at least in my experience so far, to grab a body line if you can, because this is a good spot where it's not gonna fold in on itself like MIG welds do. You don't get that valley when it cools, and it helps you keep it straight. I didn't have to worry about, or I had a good reference point that I could not change on the car right here at this body line, and then I built this panel off of it, or modified it off of it to fit. We definitely had to add a lot of weld back here because it was a little crooked, too big of a body gap there. Had to mess with this here, recess in our hole where the bolt goes right there, but that's never going to be seen. That will get covered up with body filler. You'll never know it's there. So overall, I am very pleased with how this side came out. The other side came out good. It's going to work, but this side came out so much better. If you guys have to do something like this, especially on one of these Datsuns using the classic fab panels, definitely I recommend do it this way. If you're doing that front fender, build that back piece, the support in the back, and then do your whole lower from here down. Unless you got more rod up here, you could go higher, but if you can go with a body line like this, it's easier to keep everything lined up. But that's definitely going to do it for this video. Oh yeah, we got this piece done here. That was super easy to do though. Just figured I'd do it while I had the fender off. Up next, I'm not sure. I'm going to have to think about it. One thing, the roof. So we still haven't touched the roof, right? It still is all rusty all along here, and we got a huge hole where that sunroof was. I just last week saw a company that supposedly is supposed to come out with a new roof skin for these cars. Supposedly in September, so month-ish, and you never know if they get behind, but they said September they're coming out with one. I want to wait and see how much that's going to cost. Hopefully it's not a ton. We know the price of a carbon fiber roof is about $1,500. Honestly, I'd prefer to do a sheet metal roof, so if we can get that sheet metal skin that they're coming out with at a good price, I'll probably go with that. So we're not touching this roof until then. Probably we'll get the stuff to clean up this wheel well. I got some wire wheels that we can start with, and then I'm going to get some people have recommended Evaporust. I'm going to try that. I've never used it before. Other than that, before we actually fit the 2JZ and the CD09 transmission in, because I need to make sure that the transmission tunnel doesn't need to be messed with, I think that's about it. I mean, I could do it now, right? Oh, that's right. And we found this here. This weekend. I'm going to check the other side too to see if there's any issues, but that honestly would be very easy to replace. Just cut out a rectangle right there. It is double-sided because you got the shock tower that actually welds on, and that's why we got rust in there, because you got two pieces of thin sheet metal sandwiched together. But yeah, we might check that out. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, there's always tons of stuff to do. Other stuff I've been filling in holes in the bottom of our floors that I don't need, and to get to prep for putting the 2JZ and the CD09 in, I got to take these ears off. They're going to be in the way supposedly. I think I can leave this structure on for support. That's going to be what I try first. But yeah, plenty to do. Getting ever closer to doing the 2JZ swap, putting our Apex Engineer suspension on our BC Racing coilovers as a test fit. Because I want to do all of that before we paint underneath the car and undercoat it. That way I know that there's nothing else I have to do underneath. And, you know, I'd rather do it before we actually coat the car. So anyways, hopefully you enjoyed this one. Hopefully you can take some tips off of what I learned on this Fender to help you out if you guys are doing something like this. And let me know what you think. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and I'll see you in the next video.